Good morning. I am AKA Heather Joy, and this is the lifeboat. Oh, goodness. I have something. I need to give you guys just a slight dopamine hit this morning, okay? Look at this cuteness. Look at this. Settle down. Oh, maybe she's not going to cooperate. Look at this little fuzzy girl. Can you say hi? Can you say good morning? Look at how cute that is. This gives me dopamine. Oh my goodness. And look at this one. Hey, here you go. Can you say hi to everybody? Look at the fluff, guys. Oh, goodness. They are ready to go in the morning. Goodness. Let me go put them back. I'll be right back, guys. Hang on. You were very uncooperative, you guys. Goodness. Oh, okay, bad form, I know, but I had to show you guys. They weren't very cooperative. Chickens, first thing in the morning, oh boy, they are happy. The babies, they bounce off the walls. They are everywhere. I forgot. I'll have to show them to you guys again in the evening after they're a little tired and more cooperative, because they're just the cutest little balls of fluff right now, and they're so much fun. That's what makes me happy, guys. Those sweet little things, my animals. Anyway, I better get started on things here. So welcome to the lifeboat. If you are here for the first time, if you're looking for help and support for addiction recovery, you're definitely in the right place. And I definitely encourage you to, if you feel like it, get into the chat. If you get to know people here, there's some wonderful friends. There's some wonderful people, wonderful support, lots of love, lots of hope. I love this. I love this boat. And honestly, it's a privilege that Tommy lets me come on and share things with you guys. So anyway, let's see. Better run through the rules. First of all, please, in the comment section and in the chat, no politics. We aren't a religious channel. It's all right to say things like, I'll pray for you, or I could not have found recovery without my faith. That's fine. But saying things like, my God's better than your God, and things like you're not getting into heaven because of this or that. No, please don't do that. Boy, I should know these rules by now, guys. Politics, religion. Oh, of course. Please refrain from cursing. As Captain Tommy always says, if you can't control your mouth, you can't control your life. And, oh boy, I should know these. Number 4. Oh, yes. Please, no trolls, no mean people. Please. This is a place where you get help and you find strength. This is not a place to tear people down. If you are mean, you will be kicked off. You're banned. So anyway, now that that's out of the way, I want to talk about dopamine today. I know we talk about it a lot, but I've been, before, okay, oh my goodness, what am I thinking before I even get started with that? Guess what my husband did last night? I did put it in the chat last night. I didn't get any response. Guys, he ran an ultra, a Spartan ultra. He was up by Flathead Lake up in Montana on the east side. It's so beautiful up there. It's one of my favorite race venues. I didn't get to go this year, dang it, but I was going to go up there with him. But one of my hens requires some medical care on her foot that I just didn't feel comfortable asking anybody else to do, because she fights you, and it's if you don't like um, open wounds and blood and things like that, then yeah, I just didn't have anybody I could think of that I was comfortable asking to change bandages and debride wounds and things. So anyway, so I stayed home. But yesterday he did the ultra. He started at 6 a.m. and I think it took him 9.5 hours to complete. It rained the entire time. And this is up mountains, like steep climbs, and this place is beautiful, thick trees. But this venue is incredible. It's got these boulders. It is the weirdest thing, and I cannot figure out how it was done. But all through this where we race, I think it's actually an elk ranch. But there's these boulders that have been balanced on each other, like stacked. You know how you see those stacks of stones, but the boulders are so huge that a man, even a really strong man, would not be able to move these, let alone stack them. And some of these are, just balanced, like, you've got this angle of the mountain, and yet, they're balancing stones right on the angles. And it's crazy. It's a different place. I don't know how that stuff was done, how they can balance those things, and who knows how it was done. But anyway, boy, I'm just babbling today. I apologize. Anyway, he took second place, guys. Second place in his age group, which is I believe it's the 49 to 54 age group. And he took second, guys. I am so proud of him. He did it completely in the rain. There were 40 people that he was running against that were pulled off of the course because of hypothermia. I mean, they were shaking, and they had medics running all over the mountain trying to get people down. And he did it. He stuck it out. He showed me pictures of his hands, and his hands were so swollen, just huge. Mine, after really long races, and especially in the summer, my hands will swell, but I've never seen his hands like that. And his fingertips are a little bit frostbitten. He can't feel anything. And he's driving home right now. I am so proud of him. He is, to me, just example of self-discipline. What he had to go through just to train for that sucker. That was I believe it was 35 miles in the end, all over the up and down mountains. And I think there were 66 obstacles or something. But yeah, I'm very proud of this guy. He's good. Anyway, dopamine. That's how he gets his dopamine, guys. And that's the right way to get dopamine. If you got to work for it, if you want, what is it? Delayed gratification. Yeah, he definitely believes in all of that. But anyway, chickens, guys, believe me, this has something to do with what I'm talking about today. I read this book, and I mirrored it again, but it's called How to Speak Chicken. When we first got our chickens in 2020, that's when we started our hatchery was then. And I read this book, and this book was written by a linguist. And I mean, she really watched she just did backyard chickens for a hobby, just something to do. And she started studying them, and she started to study their language. And I know what certain calls mean. If my chickens make a certain noise, a certain tone, I know whether they're happy or they're angry, or if there's danger in the area. The roosters scream out this horrible noise if they see some kind of danger, and everybody runs. But they're very good. They're very good at communicating and at teaching each other. They really, when you get baby chicks, like we just hatched a bunch a few weeks ago. You only have to train one of, oh dear, what is going on with my phone? Something's going dark. That's not good, guys. Okay. Everything's still okay. You guys are all right. Still good. That's weird. I have to reset my phone. Anyway, anyway, this linguist studied these chickens, and she started to tell that they had their own language. I mean, she started to identify. She even figured out what her name was. What they had a name for her, and she could. I don't know how she could pick it out, because I've tried. I can't pick anything out when I walk into the out on the farm, into the yard there. They make noise, but I can't pick it out. But anyway, chickens are amazing. And first thing in the morning, when I go over, like, I've got to go over after this. Oh, I'm sorry. I let everybody out of their coops. First thing in the morning, those chickens, they're happy. They are ready to go. They are ready for the day. No kidding. They are just chomping at the bit, waiting for you to open the door of the coop so they can all run out. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 5 coops I got to open up over on the farm, and they all come rushing out. And they want to get to business. They've got stuff to do. And the roosters, they come out first of all, and they just start running around everywhere, kind of checking things over and checking everybody. And then we've got a lot of little roosters, and so the male rooster, the head roosters, they've got to keep all the little guys in check. So they're looking out for the girls. They're making sure that all the roosters, the little ones, are behaving themselves and not trying to mate with the ladies, all of that. But they have their duties. They have things they got to do. And the girls, they go out first thing. They get a drink, and then they eat a little bit, and then I throw some scratch out on the ground for them, and they pick out all their favorite things that I throw on the ground for them. And then it's time to get to work. They have things to do. They really do. Whoever the head hen is, she's the first one to go lay. When she's done laying her egg, she comes back out of the nesting box, and she sings her egg song, and lets all the other hens know that it's their turn. When there's definite pecking order, but one by one they go into the nesting box, and they each lay their eggs. And after they've laid their eggs, after they've had their first meal, they start to preen themselves. And then a lot of them will go and they'll dig up the dirt, and they'll have their dirt baths, because they get in the dirt, and they get dirt all over in their feathers, because that helps eliminate pests, things like that. So but they get to work. They get their stuff done. And then later on in the day, they start going around the yard, and they're looking for bugs, and they're looking for yummy things to eat. And but they have a definite order. They have things to do, and they get their stuff done. And every morning, first thing in the morning, they are so happy. They're ready to go. And honestly, we can learn a lot. At least I can learn a lot right there from their example. And I will tie that in. I will tie that in a minute. But I have been reading this book. It's called Dopamine Nation. Let's see, what is the title? Dopamine Nation. Oh boy, no, I can't think. I got it right. I prefer I'd prefer hard copies, but this one's on my Kindle. Let me look here. Let's see. It is okay. Dopamine Nation: Finding Balance in the Age of Indulgence. Now, it's written by this doctor. Her name is Dr. Anna Lemke, and she is the chief over. Let's see. She's at the School of Medicine at Stanford, and she is the chief. She's the head over the Department of Addiction and dual diagnosis cases. That would be comorbidities, where you have a substance use disorder, and you have something like depression or anxiety, or another diagnosis. And that's what she's the head of that department. And she's done a lot of research. She's absolutely fascinating, and I'm loving reading this book. It's very interesting. Now, there's another gentleman that I listen to very often, and you guys might be familiar with him. His name's Dr. Andrew Huberman, and he's also at the medical school at Stanford, and he is a professor of neuroscience and ophthalmology, and he does the Huberman Lab podcast. And he and Dr. Lemke did. Well, she came on his podcast, and I listened to their podcast the other day. Really, really fascinating. I want to share with you what the things that they discussed in that. I thought they were very helpful, and they gave me, we talk about dopamine a lot, but the way that they explained it, and especially the way that Dr. Lemke explained it, I understood the mechanism much better in my own head. I don't know. So let me share what they talked about. Okay, first they just started talking about addiction in general. What is it? How do you define it? And they were, let's see. Where did I write that down? Okay. Anyway, well, I'm sure I'll come to it. I'll find it. Let's see. They were talking about, just how in our lives today are not set up for happiness anymore. Not the way that humans are wired. The society that we live in now, the way things are, it really isn't what we're not wired for for what's going on now. We have got an overabundance of distraction, and we have these phones and tablets and computers, and there's just an endless there's endless places to distract yourself. And we all know that dopamine is causing it's already setting kids up, especially for addiction, because they are already on their phones, addicted to their phones. Watch the power went out that was yesterday morning. Guys these days run together. But yeah, yesterday morning I didn't have power, so I didn't come on. I was going to do this yesterday morning, and thank you, Tommy, for filling in. Anyway, the kids next door, the boys, they're in middle school, and they play Fortnite, and they play Fortnite all the time, or they're on that, what is that called, the VR headset thing, Oculus, or I don't remember what it's called, but they're always on those things, or they're at least on their phones. I mean, 24/7 almost. And I have heard their mother walking into their bedroom and yelling at them to go to bed, like at 2 a.m. because they're still up. But take a phone away as punishment and watch a kid freak out. But the power, every time the power goes out, those boys go out and plug their phone, turn the car on and plug their phones in so their phones can charge. They are that addicted. They can't handle just a few hours with no electricity. They're addicted. We're already set up for addiction, unfortunately, because of our phones, honestly. But everything is so much easier compared to our ancestors. And I was thinking about this. Laundry is so easy, and I whine about doing the laundry, but I think of my grandmother's, my Australian grandmother, because because my mother and their and my grandparents' grandkids were here in the States. They came to the States a lot from Australia, but that costs, and so they went without a lot of things. And the first time I went over to visit my grandma, she had a really old washing machine that took a lot of hand effort, and a lot of you had to actually crank the clothes through that mangler, squeeze, I think that's what it's called, to squeeze all the water out. I mean, it was a really intense thing. And then she hung everything in this enclosed, she had like an enclosed area where she had a clothesline, and she hung all her clothes up. That was it. There goes my phone, getting dark again. Still working though. Okay. Anyway, it just took so much more effort and time. All I have to do is throw them in, throw some detergent in the washer, turn it on, and then when it's done, throw it in the dryer and put things away. I mean, it's so much easier. I remember hearing my grandmother talking about making soap. things like that. We do. We have things so much more easy than we used to, and so many of us don't grow our own food. We just have to go to the grocery store. So many things are just readily available. Anyway, we just it's and also they were talking about how not it's not only that life is easier as far as the chores that we have to do. We have so much more free time, and the income gap is smaller than it used to be, because there is a lot of poverty and a lot of issues, but it seems that everybody seems to have a little disposable income, and that just wasn't a thing a century ago. That wasn't like that. And this really isn't good for us. And honestly, there's nothing that we really have to do to keep ourselves alive, from moment to moment. I mean, of course, everybody's got to work and make a living and things, but life is just a little too easy, and that actually makes it more difficult for us. Because to be happy, we need friction. We really do. I know that sounds a little counterintuitive, but we really do need some friction to be happy. My husband and both of his sons, all three of them served missions. They were missionaries for 2 years in foreign countries, in rather poor country. My poor countries. My husband went to the Philippines. His oldest son, let's see, he was in Uganda, and our youngest son, he was in Madagascar. And they saw a completely different world. Nothing like what we have here. People in the Philippines and Manila, people actually, there are some that live in the cemeteries. It's a level of poverty that we usually don't see. And what was crazy though was that my husband and both his sons made the comment that the people were happy. And he said they were much happier in general than we are here. We tend to be miserable, and we're always looking for, what is our passion, and we're looking for, who knows what we're even looking for some days. But the people are happy. They don't have much, but as long as they go through their day trying to find food and trying to take care of their families, and they have very little, but they're happy and they sing all the time. My husband was always telling me, he and I both just have always shared a huge love of music. And he was always so impressed in the Philippines, how musical the people there were. They're happy though, even though they don't have much. At the end of the day, if they've been able to eat and they're home safe with their family, they're happy. And you don't see as many incidents of depression and issues. But I do know in every one of those countries, I do know that alcohol is a big problem. And my husband's told me horror stories of what would happen. Like he had to try to stop a fight between these two guys that were so drunk that they couldn't feel any pain, and they were bashing each other with hammers. The alcoholism there is a problem, but nothing to the extent that addiction is here. And they're just so much happier. And I really wish sometimes I could go back to when I was a little girl. Life was so much more simple on our farm. It was much more simple, and we were happier then, I think, despite the nonsense going on in our house. I think I really did have a good childhood in a lot of ways. But because things are so much easier, yet that really does create a problem, because we do need friction. We do need a constant, steady state of growth as humans. It's just the way that we are wired, and if we don't have that, we aren't going to be happy. And I wanted to see if I can find this. I want to show you that addiction is something that can happen to anybody. Okay, this is, if I can find it. Okay, here, this is Dr. Lemke herself. She's the chief physician over the medical school, in the Stanford Medical School, she's chief over the addiction and dual diagnosis. So, I mean, she knows her stuff. She knows the science behind it. I mean, she knows it inside and out. But let me read what happened to her. I'm going to show you. This can happen to anybody. Okay, if we aren't searching, I mean, if we aren't growing and we aren't learning, and we're stagnant, it does create problems. When we start longing for something, we look for something to fill that void, and that's what happened to her. Let's see. She said, circa age 40, I developed an unhealthy attachment to romance novels. Twilight, oh boy. That whole story was so full of plot holes. Oh my goodness, I couldn't stand it because of the plot holes. Anyway, but Twilight, a paranormal romance about teenage vampires, was my gateway drug. Okay, and this is Dr. Lemke. She said, I was embarrassed enough to be reading it, much less admitting I was enthralled by it. Twilight hit the sweet spot between love story, thriller, and fantasy, the perfect escape as I rounded the corner of my midlife bend. I was not alone. Millions of women my age were reading and fanning Twilight. There was nothing unusual per se about my getting caught up in the book. I've been a reader all my life. What was different was what happened next. Something I couldn't account for based on past proclivities or life circumstance. When I finished Twilight, I ripped through every vampire romance I could get my hands on, and then moved on to werewolves, fairies, witches, necromancers, time travelers, soothsayers, mind readers, fire wielders, fortune tellers, gem workers. You get the idea. At some point, tame love stories no longer satisfied. So I searched out increasingly graphic and erotic renditions of the classic boy meets girl fantasy. I have a friend who writes those, and I used to do the first round of editing for her. And the more she wrote with each book that she wrote after that, they got more and more graphic. Honestly, it got to a point where I said, Stacy, I can't do this anymore, and I had to stop because ew. So I understand how that, I've seen it with a writer, so it will definitely happen to people that read it too. Anyway, let's see. I remember being shocked at how easy it was to find graphic sex scenes right there on the general fiction shelves at my neighborhood library. I worried that my kids had access to these books. The raciest thing at my local library growing up in the Midwest was, are you there, God, it's me, Margaret. Does anybody, that dates me. I never read it, but I remember seeing it in the library in elementary school. Anyway, things escalated when at the urging of my tech savvy friend, I got a Kindle. No more waiting for books to be delivered from another library branch or hiding steamy book jackets behind medical journals, especially when my husband and kids were around. Now, with 2 swipes and a click, I had any book I wanted instantly, anywhere, anytime, on the train, on a plane, waiting to get my hair cut. I could just as easily pass off Dark Fever by Karen Marie Monin as Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. In short, I became a chain reader of formulaic erotic genre novels. As soon as I finished one ebook, I moved on to the next, reading instead of socializing. Dang it, what is my phone doing? Wow. Sorry, guys. At least it's still working. Okay. Where was I? Okay, I'm almost done reading this part, but I just wanted to show you. This can happen to anybody, okay? Okay, so as soon as I finished one ebook, I moved on to the next. Reading instead of socializing, reading instead of cooking, reading instead of sleeping, reading instead of paying attention to my husband and my kids, and I guess that's all she was. Anyway, she was ashamed to admit I brought my Kindle to work and read between patients. I looked for ever cheaper options all the way down to free. Amazon, like any good drug dealer, knows the value of a free sample. And once in a while, I found a book of real quality that happened to be cheap, but most of the time, they were truly terrible, relying on worn out plot devices and lifeless characters, chock full of typos and grammatical errors. But I read them anyway because I was increasingly looking for a very specific type of experience. And how I got there mattered less and less. Now, what does that sound like to you guys? She's reading, but she's looking for ever more, ever increasingly racy, erotic scenes. And, listen to that, where she said she was reading instead of socializing, reading instead of cooking, reading instead of sleeping, reading instead of paying attention to her family. What does that sound like? I mean, that's addiction to me, guys. And if that can happen to her, boy, that can happen to anybody. And I was amazed that she used herself and told her experience in this book, but I was amazed that she shared that. But I thought it was cool, and I thought it was helpful to, this can happen. Addiction has so many forms, and it can happen to anybody. So let's see. Let's talk a little bit more about exactly what is dopamine and what does it do. She gave this explanation I want to read to you. Let's see if I can find it here. I thought it demonstrated things very well. It made it easier for me to understand. Okay, dopamine, she says, is the main function. Okay, the main functional cells of the brain are called neurons. They communicate with each other at the synapses via electrical signals and neurotransmitters. Now, okay, dopamine is a neurotransmitter. And let's see, I guess they first discovered it was in 1957, they discovered about dopamine and its role as a neurotransmitter. And I've learned, more and more ever since. And let me continue here. This is this really helped me understand it. Neurotransmitters are like baseballs. Okay, the pitcher is the presynaptic neuron. The catcher is the postsynaptic neuron. Now, the space between the pitcher and the catcher is the synaptic cleft. Just as the ball is thrown between the pitcher and the catcher, that's okay. Let's see. The neurotransmitters. So that dopamine is what bridges the gap. Well, dopamine or serotonin, there's norepinephrine, there's quite a few different neurotransmitters. But anyway, those neurotransmitters bridge the distance between the neurons. Okay, it's a chemical messenger. It regulates electrical signals in the brain. And there are many other important neurotransmitters, but we're focusing on dopamine. And it says dopamine may play a bigger role in the motivation to get a reward than it actually does the pleasure of the reward itself. So it plays a role in you actually want something, and once you get it, you don't enjoy it as much as you actually wanted it. I thought that was very interesting, and there's all kinds of debates that are going on about dopamine, but I like how she explained that as, between the pitcher and the catcher. Those things like that help me a lot to understand them. If I can see that in my head, I just thought that helped. So, but dopamine is the one that when we engage in an addictive behavior, or we put a substance or alcohol or something like that, sugar, methamphetamine, whatever, when you put that into your body, you get a huge dump of dopamine, so you're going to feel euphoria and pleasure. And we all know at first, it feels good, but, the more you do it, that's when you fall into addiction. And let's see, they were talking about, they were talking about pleasure, and they were talking about, defining what does pleasure mean, and they were trying to come to a consensus, and neither of them could agree. All they decided was that trying to define pleasure, that's rather difficult because it depends on the person. But examples are things like, sex, shopping. I like this one: the smell of baking cookies, or the smell of bread or rolls cooking in the oven. Oh, that definitely dumps some dopamine in my brain when I smell that. Brings back lots of good memories. Anyway, social media, video games, drugs, all of those things, release more dopamine than you really should be having dumped in your brain. And with they were talking about addiction and trying to define what addiction is. And I think we all, understand that quite well. But they were, she, after all these years that she has worked with patients, she says, with her experience, that more than anything, addicts are escaping pain. There's something painful, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional, mental, there's something traumatic. They're trying to escape pain. It's not, you're not just doing it, you're not being hedonistic. You're trying to escape from something, but later on, unfortunately, it becomes just trying to not go through withdrawals. And just to feel normal, doesn't even, it's not even pleasurable anymore at a certain point. And, that's when you're really, really stuck in it. And again, I was talking about, discipline equals freedom. And, I had said, the easy road, it doesn't lead anywhere good. And, with addiction, a lot of times you are trying to escape from something painful. And in doing that, you have a lot of bad consequences. There's a lot of bad things that happen. And, it turns out to be even worse than if you had just, faced whatever it is you're trying to escape from and work through it. That would have been difficult, but it would have been a shorter road. Look how long and drawn out it becomes, when in addiction, where you're just trying to escape something, you're trying to take the easy way out, it ends up, that road becomes much longer and more difficult. They were talking, they started talking about dopamine and its role in, more than anything, dopamine is associated with the pleasure center in the brain. And, your body, your brain, they are always trying to maintain homeostasis. Always. They're trying to keep just a level, of the neurotransmitters that are in your brain. It's trying to just keep things, at the whatever that, your computer up here, however it has set points for everything. It's always just trying to maintain those. If you're getting too hot, your body will sweat, try to cool you down. I mean, it's always doing something to regulate and balance everything. It's so, when there's a huge release of dopamine in your brain, it definitely affects the pleasure center. But I thought this was interesting. The place in your brain where you feel both pain and pleasure, it's co-located. It's in the same spot in your brain. And I thought that was really interesting. And I thought, sometimes there is a very fine line between pleasure and pain, where, a certain stimulus can be very, very nice, but too much of it, or if it continues too long, I think, can border on the other side of pain. But I thought that was very interesting, that it's in the same place, and it makes sense once she explained what was going on. So I love this explanation that she gave, because it made things just more concrete in my mind. So she was explaining that when, as an addict, when you do something, whether it's an addictive behavior or it's a substance. When you perform that addictive behavior or you put that substance in your body, big release of dopamine, and that definitely affects the pleasure center. Now your brain is constantly trying to maintain balance. So all of a sudden you're flooded with dopamine. I want you to think of a teeter-totter. Okay. And what you want is for that teeter-totter to balance. Your mind's trying to always keep a balance. Now pretend that pretend this teeter-totter is your brain. Okay. Now you take a substance and all of a sudden, you have the dopamine released. Imagine there's a bunch of gremlins that come and they start jumping on one side of the teeter-totter. Okay, the dopamine is released. Think of those little gremlins as the dopamine, and they start jumping on one side, and that teeter-totter, moves down. And your brain is going to do everything it can to try to balance things out, but it has a reaction they call opponent process reaction. What that does is, imagine, here the dopamine gremlins have, knocked it down here. Imagine the little pain gremlins are coming onto the other side, and they're going to try to correct it. But unfortunately, it always swings back a little more this way. After, that's why you feel the withdrawals and you feel pain, when you don't have the drugs or the alcohol in your system. And they were talking about, that's basically tolerance, over time with continued use, or a certain behavior, that dopamine response becomes weaker and shorter. And that's why you have to take more in. But, here's that dopamine, weighing that down. Your body's going to try and correct it. And every time you take another dose, it's going to get the same effect, to get that teeter-totter to go all the way down again. It's going to require more, and that high you're getting, when you're tipped this way, it starts to get a lot shorter, and it's not the same anymore. But your brain is always going to do that. It's always going to try to balance things out. But your brain will flip everything. If you've taken a drug and the teeter-totter goes this way with their dopamine, the little pain gremlins are going to come and they're going to put it all the way back. It goes equally back the other way. I just love that in my head. I can see these little gremlins jumping on the teeter-totters. But for some reason, just that, seeing it like that made a lot more sense to me. I don't know why. It just did. But the pain side, that gets longer and stronger, with that opponent process reaction, and over time, it depends. It depends on the person. It depends on the drug, and it depends on a lot of things. But over time, it could be weeks, months, even years. If you are in that addiction, a lot of times that things can remain flipped this way, where the pain side, it stays here for a while. That's what you're going through with withdrawal. It stays over on this side a lot. It starts to get longer and longer. It's miserable, and that's why we want out of addiction. It's miserable, and it creates, it messes with your brain. Your brain's trying to cope, and so it's going to leave things, on the pain side for a while. And a lot of times people will experience anhedonia, where and like hedonia, like being hedonistic, searching things out that give you pleasure. Anhedonia, you're not able to feel anything, you're not able to enjoy things, and I've definitely felt that. But you can go for years and be sober, but that you can be stuck on that pain side of things, where you're unable to feel joy, you're unable to get pleasure from things anymore. And that's why people can be sober. They pick things up, got on with their lives, and be sober for 4 or 5 years. Life is really good, things are going great, and then they fall into addiction again. A lot of times it is um because that teeter-totter kind of gets stuck over on the pain side for is a very difficult thing. And as addicts, we all understand when we understand relapse, and we understand why. People don't understand that. But Dr. Lemke was saying that that was a kind of an opening to her, just through all of her research, when she realized that's why people can't feel. All playing with your brain chemicals messes things up for a while. And if you can't feel joy, and you can't feel anything, that's very, very easy for you to slip back in to addiction, so you at least feel something. I remember that very well. Something else I was going to add to that. Ah, goodness, I can't. Let's say. Oh, I remember. Okay, I remember. I remember sitting in. Gosh, where was I? I believe I was in a church, I was in a meeting, I think, we were trying to organize something. I don't even remember, but I was sitting in a meeting one day, and this had been, maybe 5 years that I'd been sober. And I'm just sitting there trying to pay attention and take notes in the meeting and give suggestions. And all of a sudden, I had this rush come over me, as if I had taken a bunch of Percocets or something, and it was odd. I all of a sudden it just hit me, and I went, whoa. I just sat there. I quit paying attention to what was going on, because I was just flooded all of a sudden that dopamine. I just had this flood of this rush. um Sometimes opiates can actually hide in your spinal cord for years, and then for whatever reason it'll be released. And I don't know if that has ever happened to anyone else, but yeah, I've experienced that. And a lot of times when people experience that, it can throw them back into addiction as well. So just something to be aware of. If um, opioids are your drug of choice, there is that. Just be aware that that might occur, uh, and just have a plan of attack for if it does happen to you. What are you going to do if you experience that? Because that does happen. Um, and they were also talking about some research, and I don't know if they did it or if it was just research that they were reading, but they did. I guess there was this study that was done with rats. Uh, they made these mazes. They made these incredible mazes for the rats. It had all kinds of things where they would have to try things and learn things to move through it. And, it was very stimulating, and the rats really seemed to like it. And, they were figuring out all of the tricks to be able to move through the whole thing. And then they get, I don't know how many weeks they let them learn the maze and play in the maze, but the rats loved it, and they learned it very well. Then they gave them methamphetamine. The rats, they I guess they redid the maze after that. They gave them the methamphetamine, and then they put them back in the maze, and the rats they couldn't remember what to do. They'd change things up in the maze a little bit, but they couldn't relearn things. They didn't have the motivation. It really mucked up their balance in their brain. And they lost their ability to learn. They lost their ability to have fun, so that was something that they realized from that study. And they started doing more studies that dopamine plays a big role in your ability to learn as well. And I was thinking about that, times in my life when I was in very deep depression. I have very little memory of things going on. Quite frequently, I have big chunks of my life that just aren't there. And I know it was, there's something about lack of dopamine that it affects your learning, it affects your memory. I think we're just beginning to learn all of the different roles that these neurotransmitters play. But I thought that was very interesting, so the dopamine, messing up the dopamine balance in your brain is going to affect your ability to learn and to remember things. But anyway, so how do we apply all this to recovery? She made a statement, and I like that. She said that people that recover from severe addiction are like modern day prophets for the rest of us. They have acquired wisdom that can benefit everyone. I loved that when she said that. And then she started, explaining why. Let me see. I can find that little section on my Kindle here that she wrote. It was really interesting. Let's see if I can find that. Oh, okay, yeah. We're all running from pain. Some of us take pills, some of us couch surf while binge watching Netflix. Some of us read romance novels. We'll do almost anything to distract ourselves from ourselves. Yet, all this trying to insulate ourselves from pain seems to have made our pain much worse. The reason we're so miserable may be because we're working so hard to avoid being miserable. I like that. Think about that again. Let me read that again. The reason we're so miserable may be because we're working so hard to avoid being miserable. Let's see. So one of the tricks that but here are these two amazing scientists talking to one another in this podcast. One of the first tricks they said is not to stay in a state of bliss too long. I mean, that's definitely something you want. In the end, you want to have that goal. You don't want to. You can't be happy all the time. It just doesn't work that way. They suggest working towards having flexibility and resilience in, with that dopamine teeter-totter in your brain. That's, ultimately what you want to work for. You need to discover more adaptive ways to get dopamine, ways that take a little more effort and things that, where your actions over time get the results. You don't want immediate results. Let's see. But anyway, at first, they were saying, patients seem to be overwhelmed by the number of things that they have to do every day that are not pleasurable. And new people that are just, recovering addicts are going to discover boredom. And boredom is a problem. They were talking about how it's a very necessary experience, and we really should allow our children to be bored. Something they need to learn how to deal with, because when you're bored, that's a really good time. They said, when when you are coming out of addiction, you spent so much time trying to get your drug and then trying to hide it from everybody and all that. Your time was very occupied, whether you realized it or not. And all of a sudden you've got all this time and you're bored. Expect that. It's really not a bad thing. And they said, it's a really good time to use some creative initiative and, start doing something creative. It's a good time to evaluate your priorities. It's a really good time to do some writing. I cannot say enough about writing about yourself and journaling. You just figure things out over time by writing every day. You really do. And that's one way to mitigate the boredom, but know that, if you are, just new in your recovery, boredom's going to be a problem. And then they also talked about how everybody always talks about, trying to find their passion. And they said, it's not actually not a good thing in a way, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to just take a key that will fit in and unlock whatever it is you're meant to do. And then of course success will follow. That's what we think. As long as we can find our passions, it's just going to unlock everything. It's going to be good after that. But that's actually not the way to look at it or to think about it. They suggest stop looking for your passion, and stop distracting yourself. You need to feel your feelings instead of hiding from them and masking them. And so, what do you do? They suggest looking around where you are. Okay. Just look around where you are. See what things need to be done. That's why Tommy's always saying, make your bed, clean things up. Look around your immediate area and see what needs to be done. Also, it suggested doing things that nobody else wants to do, as a form of recovery. These things aren't fun at first, but you do have to force yourself. But these are really good things that are going to help over time. Let's see. I was trying to follow their discussion. They were saying, it's not all about you and your will. In recovery, it said, what you need to do. They said, look around. What am I called to do at this moment? Okay, there are. You don't have to search for the perfect thing. Okay, just take care of your environment. Take care of, it said look around. Not only the things that need to be done, and things that nobody else wants to do. Take the trash out, wash the dog, whatever you need to do. But it's also, pay attention to the people in your life, because we need each other. We need relationships. We need that. So, pay attention to the jobs around you and the people around you. Take care of whatever and whomever needs the attention at that time. And that is the trick. And they're also talking about how our brains, as far as the way we're wired, we don't do well with long-term planning, where you can make some goals, like, in 10 years I want to be here, in 20 years I want to be here. But especially when you're doing recovery, it's don't focus on that so much. They suggest one day at a time. That's how our brains are wired for about a 24-hour period. And you pick yourself up, look around, do what you can do at that moment, do something that will benefit someone else. Honestly, those doing hard things, and trying to help others when you're struggling, honestly, are the best things to do. There goes my phone again. Okay. But it's the small things. It's just the little things that are more rewarding. Definitely, and it's, just learn to take pleasure in the little things from day to day, that opens things up later through time where you can enjoy bigger things. But, focus on just the small little things. And I think that's why people, that have nothing are so much happier. There's so much less to worry about. There's just a few needs that they need met. They that's what they do. They just take care of the things around them. And they were talking about Navy SEALs and how those guys, that's how they're chosen. For one thing, is people, one of the things they look for in Navy SEALs are people that pay attention to their surroundings, and don't have to be told to do things. They just see what needs to be done and they get it done. That's a good way to try and do things. I was just thinking of my chickens, every day they all have specific things that they do every day, and they get them done. They have a simple life, but as long as they have they're, as long as my chickens have their pecking order established, they've got food and water, a place to lay their eggs, they're generally happy. you know and they just take care of the things around them that need to be done. And they also talked about video games, and when you are going through recovery, you really want to limit video games, because video games are so dopaminergic. There's so much dopamine that's released during video games. And I remember as a kid playing Donkey Kong. I'm old. I remember coming home. I'd work as a waitress all the time, and in the summers, I'd get home sometimes at 2 or 3 in the morning, and I would sit down because nobody else was awake. Nobody was playing video games. I'd play Donkey Kong, and I'd think, oh, I got to go to bed because I got this and this and this to do, and yet I'd stay up for hours playing the dang thing, wasting time. Honestly, I know it's a good distraction, and you can use it as a reward, but really during your recovery, it's really not a good idea, just because of all the dopamine that's released. You're trying to reset things in your brain, and that doesn't help. But they were talking about cross addiction, how if you are an addict of something, it is very easy to pick up a different addiction, whether it be a substance or a behavior. And that's something that you need to watch for. And again, video games, that's why you really want to shy away from them and definitely limit them. And they were talking about, too, a lot of her patients, she was saying, come in with depression and anxiety because they are addicted to their video games. But they were just saying, remember to change your thinking, because we're always thinking, if I can just find what I'm meant to do, what I'm passionate about, then things would be better. That's what we always think, but that's actually backwards. You as addicts, we have a distorted sense, honestly, of pain and pleasure. What happens. You really do want to reset those pathways. So instead of looking for that passion and looking for the thing you're meant to do, it said tend to the immediate things. Just take care of those. And that's a simple thing to do. I just think about one day at a time, because that really is how we're wired. They suggest connecting to your environment, connecting to the people around you and the things around you. They said don't try to escape your reality. Connect with your feelings, write about them. They're saying, and they were saying too, this trying to escape, which is what we do as addicts. It's actually a booby price, because it takes you away from where you really need to be. And unfortunately our phones are really bad about that. And I know that I'm over the hour, but I wanted to tell you, I listened to a lady talking about a slumber party that she had for her daughter. I'm trying to remember, what was she? Was she a linguist, or I don't remember, but she definitely, followed speech patterns, and she was a professional that worked in some area there. But she had all these little girls. I believe they were 8 and 9. Pardon me. That came over to her daughter's birthday party. Well, they all came over with their devices, whether it was a tablet or a phone, and she said it was the quietest slumber party she'd ever seen. Everybody just sat there on their phones, and they were taking pictures of each other, and they were going live, and they were showing everybody else who was there at the party, things like that. But they weren't engaging with each other at the party. They were engaging with their phones, basically. And she just watched the kids, and she was shocked to find that these children were, even though they were older, their abilities to read one another, to communicate with one another, they couldn't read body signals, they couldn't read one another, because everybody spends time looking at their phones. instead of learning how to connect with each other. And she said it really disturbed her. She said their ability to communicate with each other was like maybe like a 4 or 5 year old when they were 8 or 9. I mean, they were really behind on a lot of their social skills. That's a big problem. And our phones can be just as addictive. I have a very love-hate relationship with my phone because I can't get by without it, but it drives me crazy at the same time. I hate it sometimes. Anyway, they were also the final thing they were talking about was, she works in the area of medicine that treats addiction and a comorbidity, another mental health issue. And she said that until you can reset your brain, it does no good to try to treat your anxiety and your depression. Some people have it severely enough that they're going to require medication to help mitigate that while they're trying to recover. But they were saying, it takes about 30 days of just straight abstinence for everything in your brain to finally reset. They said after about 2 weeks, it's still off balance. But it takes about 30 days, just abstinence from whatever that substance was, before things are reset. And that's just a general rule of thumb. Okay. It can take, quite a bit longer at times. But they said that it's 30 days. And by that time, your brain usually is able to reset itself. It may, I don't know. Things get really messed up if you have had recovery and you've relapsed a couple of times. It really messes things up. But they said, during that 30 days, just expect it's not going to be easy. You're going to have to deal with boredom and things like that. But you can't treat, if you truly have depression and anxiety, or other mental health issues, until you get things reset up here, giving other medications and other medicines, it's going to be hard to treat the other mental health issues. So it's a good idea to try to wait until things are a little more balanced. But they did a study with a group of alcoholics, and they were all men. They gave them, they just had 30 days, of complete abstinence. And 80% of those people, just from the abstinence, were no longer depressed after that 30 days. So, a lot of times your mental health issues are simply part of that imbalance that you've got with that dopamine imbalance in your head. Anyway, they said, don't look for replacements. Don't try to look for a replacement for your addiction. They said just do hard things. Don't look for happiness. Don't look for those things. Just take care of the things around you. Don't shy away from doing hard things. That is really the only way to find happiness and for things to reset. And you will find that by just taking care of the things around you and the people around you, that your life will get better, and you will start to feel better. You will start to engage with, with people again, and be more social, and but doing hard things, and just working hard and taking care of things around you instead of just searching for something, definitely a better way of going about it. And I really liked listening to their podcast. It was fascinating. Really good stuff. And I thought, if that's what these two scientists, and believe me, these guys know what they're talking about. They know the science behind it. They know the molecular biology, behind addiction and how to treat it. And if that's what they're telling us to do, dang, I'm going to listen, because these two people really knew what they were talking about. But anyway, that's all I've got for you guys. I hope that you guys have a great Sunday. Uh, I just want you guys to know, that I get on my knees multiple times a day and pray for everybody on the boat. I know recovery's not for sissies, addiction's not for sissies, but you're still here and you're listening to me. So you must want it, You can do it. You can do hard things. You really can. It takes time to get better, um, but it is worth it. You know, I was amazed the other day. Boy, just had a really hard day the other day. It was the 5th. Cinco de Mayo was the anniversary of my father's death. It had been 35 years that he's been gone, and it was just a hard day. Physically I was in a lot of pain. Just your body remembers anniversaries. And anyway, I got to the end of the day, and it occurred to me I did not think of escaping. I didn't think of my drug of choice even once as a way of dealing with it. I went for a run. In the end, when I got everything else done I needed to do that day, I went for a run. That's how I deal with things quite often. But you can get to that point where you don't even think about your drug of choice as an option. It doesn't even occur to you, but it does take time. But I'm here, sitting here telling you, it is possible, and you can do this. And I know it's hard, but you're here. You're still here. You're strong. You're strong enough for recovery, and you can do this. And please, guys, believe in yourselves. Hang in there. Reach out. Help each other. All right. I'll see you guys later. Have a great day. Good grief. Now it doesn't want to end. And